The Arab Sugar Daddy and the Beautiful Indian Girl. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This is a one-sided love story between a rich old Saudi man and a beautiful poor Indian girl. It was written in English and translated into Arabic by Dr. A. Ahmed. It is a story narrated in 6 books. Book 1. The Arab Sugar Daddy falls in love with a beautiful Indian girl. Copyright. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author except by a reviewer, who may quote brief passages from the review for printing in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. All characters in this novel are fictitious and any resemblance to real people, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Chapter 55. The Rights of the Kafil over the Makful in the Middle East. After opening an account at the bank and depositing her first check for the huge bribe she got from the hand of Kafil's adulterous and cheating wife, then the happy Indian maidservant and her cute daughter went with the Pakistani chauffeur to the super mall to purchase clothes and dolls. Rayhana chose 4 beautiful dresses for her daughter Ifit and 3 lovely dresses for herself. She selected 3 pairs of shoes for her daughter, 2 for herself, plus some underwear for both. She also chose some beautiful Barbie dolls for her beloved female child. Her daughter Ifit has never seen such beautiful and costly dolls before. She is altogether joyful when her loving mother buys them for her. To top off the day, they were escorted to an Indian restaurant, digging with their all fingers into a delicious mutton curry and chicken tandoori. While they were going from place to place, the Pakistani chauffeur kept talking to the Indian maidservant about one certain subject. He is trying by all means available to convince her to accept his advice and be a secret mistress or kept wife for the wealthy business tycoon Sheikh Ahmed. He openly confessed to her that his kafil had asked him to convince his beautiful Indian maidservant about his secret proposal. He said to her in that way, she could make more money and secure the future of her daughter. He tried to reason with her that she would be able to buy a house in Bombay with the money she saved and return to India, find a good Muslim boy and get married to him and settle there. No matter how much he tried to tempt her with money and future prosperity, the Pakistani chauffeur could not convince the Indian maidservant to accept his unacceptable advice. Rayhana firmly stood her ground and simply told him that she would not like to be in a secret love affair with a married man who was as old as her grandfather and who is as young as his granddaughter. Eventually, the Pakistani man Mr. Shah stumbled upon a concrete reason to make the lovely Indian woman Mrs. Khan reconsider her firm decision. Rayhana has confided in him about Sheikh Ahmed's 2 sons and openly told him what they had done to her. She could not keep inside herself how the 2 boys had secretly recorded her naked dance in the women's bathroom and how they used it to blackmail her. She told him of how they threatened to show the video saying, "Show Papa, show Mama," and the police over and over in their native tongue. She is scared that if the disgraceful video of her dancing in the nude inside the women's bathroom and masturbating while she was fully naked reached their parents and the Saudi police, she would be arrested, tried, convicted, and most likely sentenced to be stoned to death. For that reason, she allowed them to have sex with her against her wishes. Sabir pretended to be as shocked into silence. Then, he advised her to talk to their father. He reasoned that failing to do so would allow the boys to continue in their ways and blackmail her and rape her forever. Rayhana rejected this advice because she did not want their father to know what she had done in the women's washroom and what his sons had done to her. She does not want Sheikh Ahmed to watch that disgraceful video of her masturbating while she was buck naked in the bathroom. She thought that the old Saudi man might take advantage of the shameful video and blackmail her and rape her too. She does not enjoy the idea that the father might show the video to his wife, and it would be even more humiliating for her. Sabir repeatedly reminded her that she would be blackmailed and raped every night by the 2 teenage brothers if she does not complain to their father. And if she gets impregnated by one of the teenage brothers, she would get stoned to death. No judge of the Sharia court is going to believe her words if she said she had been raped by the 2 brothers. According to the Islamic Sharia, the testimony of a woman is not accepted in court. She would need 4 adult Muslim males to testify in her favor that they saw the 2 brothers when they raped her. Besides, no court would permit a DNA test to establish the paternity of the illegitimate baby after its birth. Accordingly, the driver Sabir explained to the maidservant Rayhana that she would eventually get pregnant by one of the 2 boys, which would end up being a death sentence for her. He also narrated to her the sad and alarming story of a Pakistani maidservant who was impregnated by a Saudi boy and was sentenced by the Sharia court to be stoned to death. Although the maidservant was impregnated by the son of her sponsor, the Saudi family insisted that she was impregnated by someone else. The maidservant was jailed until she delivered her baby inside the prison. Finally, she was stoned to death on a Friday afternoon, and the unwanted Bint Haram baby was sent to her late mother's family in Karachi City in Pakistan. This tragic story served its purpose and frightened the Indian maidservant to death. Rayhana became horrified at the idea she could be stoned to death. Her daughter would be left alone in Saudi Arabia, and her poor family in India would be left without anyone to help provide for them. Then the chauffeur Sabir told her how she could escape falling victim to this sad and tragic end. According to his carefully thought-out advice, if Rayhana agreed to be the mistress of Sheikh Ahmed, and if she happened to be pregnant, her wealthy kafil would either send her to India to deliver his illegitimate baby or bribe a Pakistani or an Egyptian doctor to abort the unwanted baby. Sabir knew that Pakistani and Egyptian doctors who work in the petrodollar countries are known for conducting such secret abortions. Although abortion is illegal in those rich Arab countries, for the sake of money, quite a few Pakistani and Egyptian doctors are more than willing to take the risk. They charge a lot of money in their quest to profit from the abortion of the illegally pregnant lowly foreign maidservants by their Arab employers. He even said he knows a case of a Filipino maidservant who became a few years ago pregnant by the baby of Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed. Then, the Saudi kafil paid a Pakistani doctor a huge bribe and got the illegal baby aborted. Rayhana gave rise to fear when she remembered that she had missed her monthly period twice. She concluded that she had already become pregnant. She figured that one of the 2 police officers who had raped her in the desert had gotten her pregnant. Who was going to believe her if she said she had been raped by a couple of Saudi policemen? That is tantamount to admitting adultery. Sheikh Ahmed might think the Indian man, who kept her in his apartment for a little over 2 weeks before he came and took her from the beauty salon, had impregnated her. She even remembered that she had married Aslam Ali Khan on paper. Her Saudi kafil might have him arrested, and the police might find their marriage certificate in his apartment and use it in court as a strong piece of evidence against her. How could she convince the court that she just married him on paper to stay with him for protection? Finding herself in a dilemma, she then realized she had only 2 options. She could either follow the wise advice of the Pakistani chauffeur Sabir Ibrahim Shah and become Sheikh Ahmed's kept wife to safeguard her, or face the dire consequences of her illegal pregnancy. Once again, Rayhana is faced with choosing the lesser of 2 evils and decides to follow the lesser harmful horn of her unavoidable dilemma. Since Rayhana traveled without her husband or father to Saudi Arabia, she became the right-hand possession of her Saudi kafil. By the way, the word kafil in Arabic should not be translated as a sponsor, as many people often mistakenly do. The kafil in its essence means a master or an owner of a slave. It is a leftover term from the system of slavery that was practiced in Saudi Arabia for thousands of years and is still being practiced today behind the closed walls of their society. Until today, the slavery system in Islam is taught at the prestigious Al-Azhar Al-Sharif University in Egypt. It is also included in all curriculums of schools, institutes, and universities in Muslim countries, as well as Muslim schools in Western countries. There is no Muslim scholar who can dare to remove it from the Islamic educational system because it is in the Holy Quran, and the Prophet Muhammad endorsed it and practiced it. The relationship between the kafil and his makful is nothing other than a relationship between the master and his slave. The kafil has many rights granted by the law toward the foreign makful. He has the right to kick his makful out of the country anytime he wishes. He could send his foreign makful to jail, and if he gets arrested by the police for any reason, no one could get him out of jail except his kafil. If kafil had beaten his makful, he would not have been sent to prison. If the Arab kafil has killed his foreign makful, he might receive an exceptionally light sentence. Although the law does not say it openly, kafil has the right to have sex with his foreign female makful against her wish and without marrying her. There are many recent fatwas issued by high religious authorities equating maidservants to slaves. Therefore, the maidservant is considered to be like the right hand possessed of a female slave to her kafil. The Quran allows the Muslim man to have sex with whatever number of female slaves who are deemed what your right hand possessed. Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 3 reads, "Marry of the women who seem good to you, 2 or 3 or 4, and if you fear that you cannot do justice to so many, then 1 wife, or have sex with whatever number of your right hand possessed of female slaves." We need to write a large article to help explain the above verse. In a nutshell, this verse allows a Muslim man to have 4 wives at the same time and hundreds of female slaves, as many as he chooses. Abdul Rahman ibn Awf, one of the preeminent companions of the Prophet Muhammad, had 90 female slaves for sex, and he slept with them all without marrying them. Some modern Muslim clerics issued fatwas allowing the kafil to have sex with his foreign maidservant. Many Indonesian, Filipino, Somali, Indian, and Pakistani maidservants working in Saudi Arabia and Gulf countries complained that their employers had raped them, but all had their lawsuits summarily rejected. Yet, another fatwa issued recently by a prominent Muslim scholar encouraged unmarried female employees at the workplace to breastfeed their male colleagues because it is unlawful for Muslim men and Muslim women to be together if they are not married or closely related to each other. The fatwa said the women who come into regular contact with men who are not related to them should give them their breast milk so they will be considered relatives. Fatwa is applied to men who live in the same house or come into contact with women regularly, except for drivers. Fatwa by Sheikh Alo Bacon, advisor, Royal Court and consultant, Ministry of Justice, Saudi Arabia. According to this fatwa, for Rayhana Khan to work as a maidservant in her kafil's house, she has to breastfeed Sheikh Firoz bin Ahmed. But the fatwa exempted the Pakistani chauffeur because he is the family driver. So, Mrs. Ahmed does not to breastfeed Sabir Ibrahim Shah because he is her driver. Another option, Sheikh Ahmed has to treat Rayhana Khan as his right-hand possession female slave and sleep with her any time if he chooses to do so. See Surah Al-Nisa 4. Verse 3. After the scandalous marriage of the Prophet Muhammad with his female cousin Zainab bint Jahash, the wife of his adopted son, Zayd, the Quran forbade adoption. The cancellation of adoption created a problem for those Arab families who already had adopted sons and daughters. One woman approached the Prophet and asked his advice regarding a domestic problem she was experiencing at home because of the new teaching of the Quran. See Surah Al-Ahzab 33, verse 5. Let us see how the Prophet solved that problem. Aisha reports that Salah bint Suhail came to the Messenger of Allah, Allah bless him and give him peace, and said, "O Messenger of Allah, I see on the face of Abu Hudhaifa, her husband, signs of dislike, on the entering of Salim, their adopted son, who is an ally, into our house. The Messenger of Allah, Allah bless him and give him peace, said, You have to suckle him." She said, "How can I suckle him as he is a grown-up man?" The Messenger of Allah, Allah bless him and give him peace, smiled and said, "I already know that he is a young man." Sahih Muslim, Hadith number 1453. In another hadith, she returned and said, "I have suckled him and what was there in the heart of Abu Hudhaifa has disappeared." Sahih Muslim. Before we go further and see what the consequence of that bizarre and immoral teaching is, one would like to ask how a young woman can breastfeed a grown-up man. Can you imagine a woman opening her breast and allowing a young man to suckle her nipple? Believe it or not, some wives of the Prophet Muhammad applied that teaching in their daily lives after his death. Aisha and Hafsa, wives of the Prophet, would not allow any man to enter them if he would not be breastfed first by their sisters and nieces. Aisha took that as a precedent for whatever men she wanted to be able to come to see her. She ordered her sister, Kulthum, and the daughters of her brother to suckle to whichever men she wanted to be able to come in to see her. Muwatta Malik, Hadith number 31. Yahya related to me from Malik from Nafi that Safiya bint Abi Abaid told him that Hafsa sent Asim ibn Abdullah ibn Saad to her sister Fatima bint Umar ibn al-Khattab for her to suckle him 10 times so that he could come in to see her inside her tent. She did it, so he used to come in to see her in her tent. Muwatta Malik, Book 30, Hadith number 3018. Such a moral teaching recently led an Egyptian Muslim sheikh to issue a fatwa permitting Muslim women to follow the recommendation of the Prophet Muhammad and breastfeed their male colleagues at the workplace. Dr. Izzat Atiyah, who is the head of the Department of Hadith in Al-Azhar University, which is the most prestigious Islamic institute of learning in the world, issued a fatwa. The fatwa declared that it is legitimate for a working Muslim woman to breastfeed her male colleague to avoid the sin of cloa, staying with a stranger in one room. Similar fatwas had been issued in the past by many sheikhs in many Middle Eastern countries, but this is the first time the fatwa came from a high-level academic of Al-Azhar University. Dr. Izzat Atiyah justified his fatwa by referring to the above-mentioned authentic hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad that permitted a Muslim woman to breastfeed her adopted son to make him her son through breastfeeding. To justify his scandalous marriage with his daughter-in-law, Prophet Muhammad forbade the noble social institution of adoption and deprived millions of orphaned or illegitimate Muslim children of being adopted by other families. Without this option of adoption, thousands of Muslim girls every year either kill themselves for fear of bringing disgrace to their families or get killed in honor killings by their families when they become pregnant without the sanctity of the marriage bonds. For instance, in Khartoum, Sudan, every year hundreds of Muslim girls get impregnated through the so-called al-Zawaj al-Urfi and then deliver their babies and throw them in the garbage containers to be eaten up by stray dogs. Al-Zawaj al-Urfi is a kind of Islamic marriage, which is socially unrecognized and unaccepted by Sudanese Muslim families. It is like the Shiite Mutta marriage or enjoyment marriage, where the boy and the girl marry each other without the knowledge of their families and mazun, witnesses, and any official document. Sometimes, people rescue those unwanted babies before they die. Many times, those illegitimate babies lost some of their limbs such as a hand or leg, which had been eaten up by stray dogs. The recent increase in the number of castaway babies forced the Islamic government of Sudan to open the Dar al-Migoma Center to take care of those unwanted babies. But no one is allowed to adopt one of those children and give them his name because adoption is illegal in Islam. A BBC documentary revealed on October 4, 2019, that young Iraqi girls are being sold for sex in temporary enjoyment marriages that can last as little as an hour. Such marriage is allowed by the Quran in Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 24. Little girls sold for sex in temporary pleasure marriages that can last as little as an hour. An Iraqi cleric says no problem at all to wed a girl who is 9 years old under Islamic law. So, according to Sharia, there is no problem to marry an underage girl, said one cleric. Of course not. They are following Muhammad, the perfect example, whose favorite child bride Aisha was 6 years old when he married her, 9 when he consummated their marriage and had sex with her. Chapter 56. The Genius Sex Predator and His Secret Marriage. In any case, the moment the lovely Indian maidservant Rayhana Khan agreed to his suggestion of being a secret mistress to the Saudi old geezer, the Pakistani chauffeur Sabir Ibrahim Shah picked up his cell phone and dialed the number of his kafil to convey the good news to him. By doing that, he can get a huge bribe as a reward for convincing the lovely Indian Layla to marry her Arab Qais. It is Sheikh Ahmed who told Sabir to convince Rayhana to accept his secret marriage proposal. 5 days earlier, the crazy Qais promised to give his Pakistani chauffeur a hefty reward if he succeeded in convincing his beautiful Indian Layla to marry him secretly and become his mistress and his secret-kept wife, and she could live with him forever in his opulent palace and inside his holy country. The phrase secret-kept wife brings us to explain again why the Saudi man Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed does not legally marry the lovely Indian Muslim woman Rayhana Khan and keeps her separately in another. She may leave him or another boyfriend comes along and takes her away from him as Bobby did to Min, even if the woman is a Muslim and an Arab. For that reason, Sheikh Ahmed is left with the only workable option of making Rayhana his secret mistress or his hidden, unlawful kept wife. The need to own her is implied in the word wife. Even though it would not be a real marital relationship, it would suffice for the crazy old man. Sheikh Ahmed could have easily raped Rayhana as soon as she came to his country and became under his control and his roof. After she is counted as his right-hand possession female slave, she becomes his halal slave to have sex with her. Nonetheless, he decided not to resort to coercion regarding this sensitive matter, but decided to use his money to buy her heart and body as he did before with his first Indian wife, the lovely girl Christie, who kicked him out of his mansion in Bombay while the shoe shooting up his old ass. Sheikh Ahmed could have married Rayhana and put her in a palace in India, but his bitter experience with Christie and Bobby taught him a lesson that he would never forget for the rest of his life. He does not want to fall into the same hole again or be bitten by the same Indian snake twice. After his beautiful Rayhana said Kabul to his secret marriage with her, a naughty and crazy idea crept into the mind of the old geezer, and he jumped on it. At the time of conducting the marriage contract, any Muslim girl in India would be asked by the religious Mazoon or mullah to say Kabul, which means she agreed to marry her husband-to-be. This Urdu word means I agree with marriage. This is only in India because it is a secular country and the law requires the girl's consent. In most of the other Muslim countries, the Mazoon of the Maulana who authorized to conduct marriages would not even meet the girl or see how the bride looks. Her father is the one who is supposed to meet her prospective husband and the Mazoon, and the father is the one who has to say Kabul. Whether the girl agreed to the marriage or not is not Mazoon's business. For a Mazoon to conduct a lawful marriage and issue the marriage certificate, he needs the signatures of the father, the future husband, and the two Muslim male witnesses. Most marriages in Muslim countries are conducted in mosques as if the marriages were between the future husbands and the fathers of their brides. I think Muslims should be given credit for being the first people on earth to come up with the idea of gay marriage. According to Islamic Sharia law, a woman is utterly incompetent to enter into a marriage contract herself or for anyone else, even though her guardian could authorize her to do so. A father can contract the marriage of his virgin daughter with any man without asking for her consent, whatever her age, cited in Varma 1988, page 24. When Rayhana said Kabul to be a kept wife, Sheikh Ahmed all of a sudden changed his mind and decided to marry her properly. Howbeit, he wants to marry her in a very strange way. No human being has ever thought or dreamed of what he is planning to do. If his plan worked, he would be the first to conceive the bright idea and his name must be added to the list of the Guinness World Records. He wants to hire a man to marry his lovely maidservant Rayhana instead of him. It made sense to him as the hired husband would be a husband on paper just like the pimp Aslam Ali Khan, but the lovely bride would be all his and his alone. Just like the former Indian pimp and his female victim, no sex would be involved between the newly wedded couple. She and her paper husband shall live in the sheikh's house, but no one would touch her except him. In fact, in Islam, there is something remarkably close to this crazy plan of his. There is a hired husband in the Sharia law known as the muhalal. The only outstanding difference between Sheikh Ahmed's paper husband and the Sharia law husband, the muhalal, is that sex is forbidden for the paper husband and in the latter instance, sex is allowed only once. This one-time sex will legalize the pussy of the thrice-divorced wife so her ex-husband can marry her again. Of course, we need to explain this for better and proper understanding. Some Muslim men who divorced their wives 3 times and wanted to have them back would not like their ex-wives and also soon-to-be wives again fornicating with other men. To play around with this muhalal's business, the husband would arrange for his ex-wife's safe return by getting her married to a muhalal or a legalizer on paper for a day and have her divorced the next day. Alas, the Prophet Muhammad said otherwise. In the book of Asbab al-Nuzul, page 46, the Sayyidi stated that a woman came to the Prophet Muhammad and told him that Abdul Rahman, the muhalal whom she wed after she was divorced 3 times by her husband, had divorced me without having any sexual intercourse with me. May I go back to my ex-husband? Muhammad said to her, no, that is not permissible until Abdul Rahman has sex with you first, then you may go back to Rafah. The same case was narrated differently by the beloved wife of the Prophet Muhammad. Aisha said that the woman of Rafah al-Qartzi came to the Prophet Muhammad and told him, Abdulrahman has divorced me and I was with him like a piece of his cloth, without having any sexual intercourse with me. The Prophet told her you cannot go back to your husband until you taste his honey and Abdulrahman tastes your honey, Sahih al-Bukhari. In other words, sexual intercourse should be done at least once between the ex-wife of Rafah and her muhalil, Abdulrahman. The muhalil's penis should enter the wife's vagina or pussy and ejaculation must take place therein. Sheikh Ahmed now has to convince his Pakistani chauffeur to marry Rayhana on his behalf, but never have sexual intercourse with her. He smiled at his brilliant logic. He does not want Rayhana under any circumstances to return to her country. Even if she decided to leave him and run away, she would not be able to do so. According to Islamic Sharia law, a married woman cannot travel to any place without her husband or a muharram. By marrying the Pakistani chauffeur Sabir Ibrahim Shah, his Indian wife Rayhana Khan cannot travel anywhere without his permission and company. This restriction is directly from the mouth of the Prophet Muhammad. A woman does not travel except with a muharram, Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, which is usually a father, brother, grown-up son, or grandfather. Of course, she can travel with her lawful husband too. But in no uncertain terms, she cannot go out of her house without one of those close relatives. Even her mother cannot take her out of the house of her husband, which should be called a maximum security prison. A Muslim girl can go out of her father's house either to go to her husband's house in case of marriage or to her grave in the event of her death. Thus, the wife is literally tied to her husband or muharram wherever she goes. Should Rayhana and her paper husband decide to deceive or double-cross their Arab employer who is their Saudi kafil and flee together to India, Sheikh Ahmed knows that the Indian consulate in Jeddah would never issue a visa to a Pakistani man. It would be easier for a Muslim terrorist to get a 6-month tourist visa to the USA than for a Pakistani man to get permission to visit India for 1 day or even 1 hour. The Indian government is thorough in blacklisting almost every single Pakistani male alive. For them, each Pakistani male, young or old, is a dangerous Muslim terrorist. Secondly, Sheikh Ahmed, like most men in the third world, abhors the use of a condom while having sex with his female sex partner. So, he expected that his secret-kept wife might get pregnant from their first encounter on a bed. If so, he would just take her to a Pakistani doctor, bribe in hand, and have the unwanted baby aborted. This would expose his wife's sundry indiscretions unnecessarily to all. His way, he reasoned, if a baby should result from the secret union, the baby would be considered by his family members and Sharia law the child of the paper husband, his Pakistani chauffeur. Thirdly, Sheikh Ahmed wants to give his fourth Saudi wife peace of mind. He knows from day one, his wife had become restless and worried about the moral integrity of the male members of her family, he included too. She had voiced her concern to him, and in this way, she could take comfort in the knowledge that Rayhana is safely married to their Pakistani chauffeur. Ironically, if he only knew what was going on between his righteous wife and his faithful Pakistani chauffeur, he would not have to bother about her peace of mind at all and might get rid of the two adulterers in a double honor killing. Lastly, Sheikh Ahmed wants to protect his beloved Indian Layla from his 2 teenage sons. He knows that, as long as she is single and sleeping all alone in her storeroom, his sons will be tempted to approach her at night and rape her. Once again, if he knows they had already raped her at night, their father might have killed his bad 2 sons for daring to violate the pussy of his lovely Layla. His eyes did not lie when he witnessed the 2 boys' first sighting of her. He saw with his own eyes both brothers got extremely sexually aroused, and their penises stood like sticks inside their jilbabs. Sheikh Ahmed seemed to have thought of every possible loophole except one. What about the paper husband, the Pakistani chauffeur? How could he trust a young man like Sabir Ibrahim Shah to sleep chastely with his beloved sexy Layla? Both are young foreigners and close to each other in age. They speak the same language and share the same culture. He mused that perhaps Rayhana may prefer to have sex with a younger man 4 decades his junior. When Rayhana said her kabul to his marriage, there were only a few days remaining before the old Saudi man would celebrate his 70th birthday. Sabir has no wife in Saudi Arabia or in Pakistan. So, such a beautiful and sexy young woman like Rayhana sleeping by his side every night would be a perfect temptation. It is akin to leaving fresh meat near a hungry dog, expecting the meat to remain intact and untouched every night. A meticulous sex predator like Sheikh Ahmed would not make such a grave error. It is, in fact, the first loophole he thought of, and so he planned on just how to cover it. Here, he openly exposed his selfish nature and his evil genius sex mentality. Here also, the old religious practices of the Muslim caliphs, the kings of the Umayyad and Abbasid dynasties, and the Muslim sultans of the Ottoman Empire are resurrected by him. Sheikh Ahmed justifiably decided to act as a Muslim caliph or sultan and turn his Pakistani chauffeur into a eunuch. However, he knows quite well that Sabir would rather choose to die or get killed than become a castrated man. Even if he promised to give him 1,000,000 Saudi riyals, 50,000 American dollars in cash, and 10 brand new cars, he would say nay. Accordingly, the evil and selfish sheikh has decided to castrate his chauffeur without his consent and knowledge. In his selfish obsession for the extremely beautiful Indian woman, Rayhana Khan, the lives of many innocent people had already been destroyed and crossed the path of the evil old geezer, Sheikh Ahmed. Jamal Khan went to jail and had been eventually sentenced to 15 years in prison. The Sudanese foreign student, the so-called fucking black Negro slave boy, Babakar Aliawar, is suffering in an Indian rotten jail waiting for trial, which might confine him under lock and key in prison forever, and Muhammad Khan's business had been ruined completely, and he became a madman and locked forever in a mental asylum as a dangerous lunatic man. We can add to the list of destroyed innocent people the 2 teenage sisters of Jamal who ran away from their hut and became prostitutes at Ferris Road when their brother went to jail for 6 months. The beautiful Bulbula who committed suicide because her boss raped her without the use of a condom and made her pregnant when Muhammad Khan got insulted by Sheikh Ahmed and made him drink alcohol in his office for the first time. Not to forget Jamal's 2 brothers who ran away from home and joined the gangsters, and one got killed in a hit-and-run car accident while he was begging on the streets. Hopefully, the destruction and mayhem will end there, and no more innocent souls get destroyed in this one-sided mad love of the Arab Qais for the Indian Layla. Oops, we have forgotten to mention the recent brutal rape of the innocent maidservant Rayhana Khan by those 2 demon-possessed Saudi policemen. Surprisingly, Qais never bothered or paid much attention when he heard the tragic story of the brutal rape of his beloved Layla. It seemed that he knows in his male-dominated country a man should not be blamed for raping the unprotected, lovely young woman who walked on the street with her face, hair, and hands opened and exposed. Also, he might have understood he would not be able to prove such a rape of a foreign maidservant by a couple of Saudi policemen in the Sharia court because she is a woman and her testimony is not accepted. They said even if a Muslim woman saw her son being killed in front of her eyes, she could not prove his murder in court. Lastly, it might be because he is afraid the Saudi policeman might rape his lovely and sexy Indian maidservant all over again if she brings to them such an unprovable accusation against their police colleagues. Chapter 57. He was preparing for the pseudo-marriage. That day, when Rayhana returned to the house of the noble family, there were some noticeable changes. She is informed by Mrs. Ahmed that her quarters have been moved from the small storeroom to a big room near the kitchen. She has been given the key to her new room. Mrs. Ahmed told her that if she needed to go to the women's washroom or her daughter at night, she could open her door whenever it was convenient. This important human need was ignored before, and during those few dark days, if Rayhana or her daughter wanted to go to the washroom, they were unable to because they were locked up like dangerous wild animals. If a fire broke out or an accident happened, they would have been burned alive or bled to death inside the dungeon with no windows, which is not different from a mass grave. As icing on the cake, Rayhana has been informed by the suddenly kind and generous woman that her daughter Ifit is going to be sent to an all-girls school. She would not need to worry about transportation because the girls' bus comes every day and takes her 7-year-old daughter to school and brings her back. In addition to that, if it would not need to work anymore, she has to tend to her studies, and in her playtime, she needs to get some exercise and play with her new dolls. Even the little daughter got her small room to sleep in all alone. In most Muslim countries, coeducation schools are unheard of. No mingling of boys or girls, even at the grade school level. Albeit, in some Muslim countries like Sudan and Egypt, Christians could attend private schools where boys and girls studied together. It was only after Sudan implemented Sharia law that those schools were jointly shut down by orders of the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Religious Affairs. In the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, women are not allowed to drive cars. Only men are allowed to drive vehicles and bicycles. The driver of the schoolgirls' bus has to be a male 70 years of age or older. If the girls' bus broke down or was involved in an accident, the traffic police would close down all streets leading to the location. If any male dared defy the police and ventured into the cordoned-off area, he would be killed or mortally wounded by the bullets of the cops. The police would then phone the Ministry of Education and report the matter. The Ministry of Education would send another girls' bus with another old male driver. This might take hours. Even so, the girls are to sit inside the bus and await the second bus to arrive. Then and only then when the girls are told to quickly board the new bus. The girls are covered from head to foot with black abayas and niqabs, which wrap their bodies like onions. Even if you were to use long-range binoculars, you would not be able to see a hand, finger, or a toe of any one of those female students. Only until all the totem female creatures are transferred in full secrecy from the first bus to the second bus and the new bus has left the restricted area, would the police open up the street to traffic again. I am not trying to belittle the Muslim women of this country by calling them female creatures. In the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the holy land of Muslims, no one refers to a woman by her name or gender. For example, no one would call a girl by her name like Fatima or by her gender. She will be called by everyone the daughter of Osman or the wife of Hassan. A woman or girl is not called she or a female. Every girl and every woman is called al-makhluqa, which literally means the female creature. It is in the spirit of things that you will find the windows of every girls' school bus adorned with black drapes. So, if the bus happened to pass you by, do not ever dream of catching a glimpse of what is inside. Even if one of the naughty girls happened to defy restrictions of total separation and privacy and rolled back one of the curtains or pulled them down, you would not be able to see anything except a spook covered from head to foot in a black coffin and a mysterious spirit of thick gloom. A Halloween black witch might look better and less scary than a Muslim girl in her black abaya and niqab. On the fifth day, Rayhana's sponsor sent his secret marriage proposal to her through his Pakistani pimp Sabir Ibrahim Shah. Out of fear for her life and due to her strong belief that she is pregnant, Rayhana consented to become the secret mistress of a man who was over 48 years older than her. She was petrified when she saw the old geezer again. She is afraid he might jump on her at any moment and rape her because she is, for all wants and purposes, his sex-secret concubine. Not in the know, the odd behaviors of the so-called noble family puzzled Rayhana. Everyone she met in that house turned out to be abnormal and amoral. She is troubled by the unnatural behaviors of the two teenage sons who managed to enter the women's washroom and videotape her naked. The naive Rayhana is under the impression that the two sons somehow entered the women's bathroom, hid, and shot the video. She is also baffled by the sexual intercourse and shameful adultery and porn video she witnessed between Mrs. Ahmed and the Pakistani chauffeur. She is puzzled as to why the wife of the old man is not satisfied with her husband. Why does she need a manservant for sex? Lastly, Rayhana is really confused by Sheikh Ahmed's desire for her. Why is he not content with his 4 Saudi wives? She had already learned through Sabir Shah that Sheikh Ahmed has 4 wives, and every day he visits 1 night of the week to perform his husbandly duties. Rayhana asked herself, why does the old geezer want or need a maidservant for sex? She is puzzled by the sexual prowess and strength of such an old man. How could he manage to have sex every night with a different woman and still want another one? Did he bring her from India to his country for sex? While Rayhana is wrapping her extremely naive and unsophisticated mind around these things and trying to understand what it all means, the Pakistani chauffeur approaches her in the kitchen and tells her something that confuses her even more. The report from Sheikh Ahmed suggested that she has to get immediately married to Sabir on paper. As she listened to his explanation, it made no sense to her whatsoever. She vividly remembered that Aslam Ali Khan convinced her to marry him on paper out of fear his neighbors would report him to the cops to have him and his Indian concubine get stoned to death. So, it is doubly perplexing to her that now she is to be married to the chauffeur of her sponsor on paper too. Sabir Shah told Rayhana Khan that Sheikh Ahmed has to deal with his wife's insisting he kick out the new maidservant because she might corrupt her 2 teenage sons. The chauffeur revealed her sponsor knows full well that his wife's rantings are justified on the grounds the new Indian maidservant is young and beautiful and possesses a very irresistible sexy body. For that reason, her sponsor thought that if the maidservant agreed to marry the chauffeur on paper, his wife would have peace of mind. The wife would then be satisfied knowing that her teenage sons would understand the maidservant is now a married woman with a lawful Muslim husband to protect her, and therefore they would not come near her room at night and rape her again. Rayhana does not like the idea at first, but when she heard that the chauffeur would protect her from those 2 evil sons who had already raped her, she changed her mind and once again said Kabul to his marriage betrothal. Sheikh Ahmed used to spend only 1 day with his 4th wife, but for reasons known only to himself, he decided to spend 3 days with his wife number 4. When wife number 4 asked him why he was spending more days at her residence, he replied that he was not feeling well and needed to take some rest until he recovered. The ignoble and despicable Arab woman does not like that her husband is spending all this time at her house. She knows it does not matter really how many days he stayed at the residence because he is not going to touch her anyway. Try as she might, she could not remember the last time her husband actually had sex with her. It has been years. For that reason, she went for the handsome, young Pakistani, Sabir Shah, to satisfy her sexual needs. She is older than her secret lover and younger than her husband. When the 2 servants agreed to marry, Sabir Ibrahim Shah is 30 years old and Rayhana Khan was 22 years old. The lustful old geezer is 70 years old by now. That day, Sheikh Firoz bin Ahmed sent his Pakistani chauffeur to request the presence of his Indian maidservant to have her come and meet her Saudi kafil in the living room. At once, Rayhana left the kitchen and walked into the living room. Then, the old Saudi told the Pakistani chauffeur in front of his wife to take the new maidservant to the super mall to purchase a total of 7 dresses, 4 for Rayhana and 3 for Ifit. They should also purchase inner garments and 3 pairs of shoes each. The kind sponsor ordered that when little Ifit returned from school, she should have at least 3 beautiful new Barbie dolls in her room. When Sheikh Ahmed extended his wonderful generosity towards his maidservant and her little daughter, his noble wife was sitting near him in the living room. The despicable wife is careful not to let it be known the fact that she has already bought clothes and dolls for the maidservant and her daughter. She just kept silent and offered no objections. What troubled her heart more was seeing her secret lover going out with the young and beautiful maidservant. She is afraid they might get along a little too well and fall in love at first sight. It would seem Sheikh Ahmed had immediate plans for the young maidservant and chauffeur. He had already phoned many places and made many preparations for the pseudo-marriage between Rayhana and Sabir. He had told Sabir some of the details of his scheme but hid many other details from him. He decided to keep the marriage of his 2 young servants as a great surprise for his wife and their 2 sons. Rayhana had technically given her Kabul the previous day, but Sheikh Ahmed decided not to rush things and be prudent. The Arab Qais could have crept into the room of his beloved Indian Layla for she had already agreed to surrender herself to him, but he controlled his lustful inclinations and decided to wait until everything was done properly. He knows it is only a matter of a few short hours before his lovely Layla is going to be his and his alone. He would then have to possess her forever. He has to admit that he had never enjoyed such a dreamy and peaceful night's sleep in all his life until after his Layla had said to him, Kabul. Following the orders of his master, the chauffeur took Rayhana first to a private clinic. It is owned and run by a corrupt medical Pakistani doctor. Sheikh Ahmed has told Sabir that he met Rayhana by chance while she was roaming on the streets of Colaba in Bombay. Therefore, he is scared Rayhana might be a prostitute and carrying some dangerous sexually transmitted diseases such as AIDS, syphilis, genital herpes, etc. So, before he sleeps with her, he wants to make sure that she is not carrying any infectious disease. Accordingly, before conducting the paper marriage, Sabir is to take Rayhana to the Pakistani doctor for a thorough medical examination. On the other hand, the story he told Rayhana is that the law in Saudi Arabia requires every couple to go through a medical checkup before they are to get married. In the interest of keeping that facade, Sheikh Ahmed told his chauffeur to undergo a checkup too. In that way, his beloved Rayhana would not be suspicious of his intentions. Of course, that is just what the old Saudi told his Pakistani driver. The Pakistani doctor had received a totally different set of instructions as far as the chauffeur was concerned. Firstly, he knows very well that Rayhana is not a prostitute. She refused to give him her body even though he offered to pay her thousands of rupees. Secondly, he told the corrupt Pakistani doctor to put Sabir under general anesthesia and castrate him. Thirdly, regarding his Indian maidservant, he strictly warned the doctor not to expose her nakedness or even touch her body, especially her private parts. He demanded one of his female nurses check Rayhana for any possible disease. If need be, the nurse should treat her ailments, if any. When the soon-to-be married couple arrived at the clinic, the Pakistani doctor kept up the charade and promptly sedated the Pakistani chauffeur. He then castrated him under general anesthesia. When Sabir gained consciousness, he felt a dull ache in his penis and testicles, never suspecting what has transpired. Rayhana underwent a full-body checkup work performed by a female nurse. All tests are negative. After her checkup, Rayhana had to wait a long time for the chauffeur to rejoin her. She felt a great relief when the Pakistani young man finally appeared, but she was curious why his checkup took so much longer than hers. Having no knowledge or reason to question the procedures at the clinic, she does not bother to find out the reason for the delay from him or the clinic. Chapter 58. The Wrath of the Adulterous Arab Wife. Immediately after the clinic appointment, the two servants went to the appointed Pakistani religious mazun or mullah and asked him to conduct their Islamic halal marriage. Sheikh Ahmed had already phoned the religious leader and informed him that his two foreign servants were getting married and coming to his office to conduct their happy matrimonial union. As soon as she laid eyes on the mazun, Rayhana recognized his face. He is the very same Pakistani imam who came to the apartment of Aslam Ali Khan and conducted her former pseudo-marriage or the halal Islamic nikah with the Indian pimp who sold her as a female sex slave to his Saudi friend. The Pakistani imam or mazun also has not failed to recognize the extremely beautiful Indian girl Rayhana that he had conducted her marriage with another young Indian man before. He is surprised how a married woman could get divorced in less than 3 weeks and then go for another man. He knows according to the Quran she is supposed to wait for 3 months and 10 days before she gets remarried to another man. But for the sake of getting his money, he ignored the matter of legality. He is minding his own business. He does not say anything to her. He photographed the couple with his little camera and then conducted their so-called halal nikah contract. He has his own 2 Muslim male witnesses to add their signatures to the marriage. After receiving his fees, he issued their 2 marriage certificates and handed them over to the 2 newlyweds. Rayhana, in yielding to the complicated situation, kept mum too. She thought there was no need to inform her new pseudo-bridegroom about her former paper husband. It does not matter if he does not know because he too is just like a fake cock who has a new hen or a dog with a bitch, but he has no right to have sex with her. After the religious marriage, the newly wedded couple was allowed to leave the Pakistani imam's place of business, and the bridegroom took his on-paper bride to the super mall. Sheikh Ahmed had already phoned a boutique shop and placed his order for a beautiful wedding gown for his secret-kept wife or concubine and a dashing suit for his Pakistani pimp. The eccentric crazy lover Kais wants to see his lovely Layla in her wedding gown so that he can enjoy his first wedding night with her. His dream is, at last, coming true. He had already lost her twice before. The first time he lost her was when she was jailed for many months in a Bombay prison cell, and the second time was when he thought that she had been raped and murdered and her body dumped somewhere in the sands of the Saudi Arabian vast Sahara Desert. But then after his Allah has resurrected her from the desert plains and given her to him on a silver platter with gold trimmings at the Filipino women's salon, the old geezer has a conviction that no power on earth could snatch her from his hands again. In his mind, she has come into his house, agreed to be his kept wife, and destined for him and him alone. The crazy Qais even concluded that not even his Allah could separate him from his beautiful beloved Layla again. After purchasing the new dresses, underwear, and pairs of shoes and dolls for Rayhana and her cute daughter Ifat, the newly married couple enjoyed their delicious lunch in a beautiful Pakistani restaurant. Then, they went to the boutique shop and received the purchase and paid for a beautiful wedding gown for the lovely Indian bride and a dashing suit for the handsome Pakistani bridegroom. They have used the fitting room of the boutique shop and put on their beautiful wedding dresses. Sheikh Ahmed has given his chauffeur a secret password. He told him not to bring his bride in her wedding gown to the house until first contacted him on his cell phone, and the correct passwords were exchanged between them. The paper bridegroom is supposed to pick up the cell phone and say the name Layla, and as a response, Sheikh Ahmed would return with the secret password, Qais. This would signal that the coast is clear and they are to enter a safe haven in the dining room without asking for permission. Without the password, the newly-wedded couple are supposed to stay and wait outside the dining room until Sheikh Ahmed would phone them back. In the meantime, the old husband's strange behavior does not escape his fourth wife's observation. She has no idea what the evil genius has for her in store. Although he claimed to be sick, he looked well and happy. He is cracking jokes and showing so much affection towards her. He even came into the kitchen and helped her while she was cooking lunch. When the lunch was prepared, he was the one who carried the heavy tray into the dining room. While the joyful old man is sitting at the dining table surrounded by his strict and always angry wife and two bad sons, his cell phone suddenly begins to ring. He took his cell phone out of his pocket and glanced at the caller ID. He raised his voice and shouted a greeting. Then, he shouted even louder and said Qais. After that, he cut off the cell phone and replaced it in his pocket. He even kissed his phone before putting it inside his white jilbab big pocket. His wife and sons could not understand this brief exchange of greetings on the phone. His big son Khalid asked him, "Papa, who is this Qais?" "My two beloved sons, Khalid and Tariq, and my dear wife Mastora, today I have a great pleasant surprise for you. I am sure it is going to make each one of you incredibly happy." Before his beloved sons and dear wife could be able to demand an explanation about this great pleasant surprise, the door of the dining room is thrust open and the incredible surprise has entered in flesh and bones while they are holding hands together. The two sons have already considered Rayhana as an exceedingly gorgeous young Indian woman and having a sexy body, but when they saw her clad in her wedding gown, they thought a virgin of paradise had descended from heaven and appeared in human form before their very eyes. They stood up while their mouths were opened without uttering a single word. Mrs. Ahmed has a different set of emotions boiling inside her when she sees the newly wedded couple. She felt the urge to pick up the knife from the dining room table and stab Rayhana in her heart for having the audacity to marry her secret handsome lover. Every passing second does nothing to quell the rising flame ripping her jealous heart into pieces. If anyone had touched her body at that critical moment, she would have exploded for sure as if she were a female suicide bomber terrorist with an explosive device strapped around her thin body. As fate would have it, it is the hand of her husband who touched her at that very instant. What followed is the loudest, angriest filth anyone has ever heard coming out of her contemptible mouth. She said to her husband, "Kosomak ya ibn al-Sharmuda, Anik Omak, if you dare to touch me again, which means you motherfucker, I will fuck your mother." Then she pushed his hand away in a fit of indescribable anger. If she is not the daughter of one of the richest men in Jeddah City, her husband would have strangled her to death for daring to call him the son of a bitch, and "I will fuck your mother's pussy if you touch me again." But he is scared that her dangerous father might either send him to jail forever or get him beheaded for daring to murder his daughter. Besides, the old geezer is worried that he might lose the profitable business partnership of her wealthy father if she told her daddy that her husband has beaten her for the sake of a lower-than-dirt Indian maidservant. Therefore, her husband could neither reprimand her for her filthy words nor attack her physically. Instead, he requested the newly married couple occupy 2 chairs near her and have lunch with the noble family. Before she could do or say anything, the 2 wedded servants sat down and occupied their seats as if they were sitting on their wedding thrones. Unfortunately, the lovely new bride sat beside her, carefully arranging her beautiful wedding gown around her, but still, it touched the outraged woman of the house. That is the feather that broke the camel's back. The extremely outraged wife began to shake in rage and foam in her mouth. Therefore, she used both her hands to push Rayhana and her gown far away from her, and the shove made the new bride plop down on the floor right next to her chair. Then, with the fury that followed, she opened her mouth wide open and shouted, "How dare you come to sit with us, you fucking and stupid Indian maidservant!" Rayhana shot up to her feet and fled for her life, heading to the kitchen. Her bridegroom stood up on his feet and began to tremble from head to toe. "You stupid Pakistani kolam and slum dog, how dare you to marry that stupid Indian maidservant without informing me or asking my permission?" "Mastora, I gave them permission to get married," shouted Sheikh Ahmed. "She has come here to serve us, not to get married and have a honeymoon and get fucked all night long as if she is in an Indian dirty brothel house and we are here pimps. She is our paid maidservant and not our female slave. We cannot decide for her when she can marry or to whom she has to wed. Okay, go and book for her a room in a 5-star hotel and let her enjoy her honeymoon there. I don't want to see her anymore in this house." "Mastora, calm down. Remember, I am the one who brought her to work for you. I could have sent her to any of the other 3 wives, but you said you needed a maidservant. I don't want her anymore. I will do all the housework by myself. Send her wherever you want to send her. I do not care. Except she is not staying here." "No, you cannot order me. Rayhana is going to stay with her husband Sabir and work in this house." "Yes, my dear mother, please let Rayhana stay here. She is an exceptionally good housekeeper and a genuinely nice lady. We like the way she cleans our rooms better than those other ugly African maidservants. She does particularly good work here and we're incredibly happy with her," said Khalid. "Yes, our mama. Rayhana is our beloved sister and we love her so much. She shouldn't go to any other house," said Tariq. Feeling the walls closing in on her, Mrs. Ahmed got up from her chair and marched straight toward her bedroom. The sound of slamming doors followed. Immediately, Sheikh Ahmed stood up and asked his chauffeur to follow him to the kitchen. When he entered the kitchen, he found Rayhana sitting in a corner, crying bitterly. He sat beside her and embraced her so dearly. It felt so good, for he had never touched his beloved Indian Layla so tenderly before. If it was not for his 2 teenage sons who came running in behind the Pakistani chauffeur, he would have kissed her on her lips and more than likely consummated his marriage and had sex with her right there on the kitchen floor and fulfilled his heart's longing. For the sake of this special day, the mad Arab Qais waited for so long, spent a lot of money, and fought many deadly battles against human beasts and dangerous Hindu policemen. Chapter 59. On the first wedding night of Qais and Layla, Sheikh Ahmed waited impatiently for the sun to go down so that he could spend his first wedding night with his beloved secret concubine. His beloved Layla has given him the Kabul, and his convoluted plan of getting her married to his chauffeur worked perfectly, his furious wife aside. He phoned the Pakistani doctor and confirmed that Sabir Ibrahim Shah had been rendered totally sexually impotent. After hugging his beloved Layla for the first time in the kitchen, the madman Qais helped her to stand on her feet. Then, in front of his sons and playing his role to the hilt, he led his lovely bride Layla by the hand to her room. His sons and his Pakistani chauffeur followed them silently. The 2 sons are very much touched by the fatherly affection their father showered upon their beloved maidservant, who they had tasted her sexy body on the floor of the storeroom. If it was not for his sons shadowing them, the crazy Qais would have carried his lovely Layla in his arms to their wedding suite and begun enjoying her marvelous beauty and extremely sexy body. Reaching the room, Sheikh Ahmed has lovingly helped Rayhana to lie on her bed. He insisted that she lie down on the bed and rest. The bride followed his request and lay on the bed motionless and in shock. While the lovely bride is laid out on the queen-sized bed in her beautiful wedding gown, Sheikh Ahmed whispers a few Arabic words in her ear. He promised that his ugly and stupid wife would not bother her anymore. But Rayhana does not understand what he has told her in Arabic. Seeing her lying there on the big bed as a virgin bride ready for her bridegroom aroused the crazy old man to a heightened passion and desire such as he had never felt before. His old penis stood like the root of an old tree or a fungus on his private parts. Ever the strategist, he knows that it is just a matter of time until his life's dream comes true. Just before leaving, he gave Ifrit a sweet fatherly kiss on her forehead. All this time, Ifrit is sitting in the bedroom of her mother playing with her beautiful new Barbie dolls. She returned from school an hour before her mother came back. Mrs. Ahmed, not knowing what was about to transpire in her mansion, had fed her well and told her to go play with her dolls in her mother's room. Then the crazy Kais told his Pakistani pimp, who is his translator, to tell the little Ifrit to go to her small room and sleep there. The old geezer wants to make sure when he comes at night to sleep with his lovely bride Layla, her little daughter will not be there to spoil his best first wedding night with her mom. Even when he married his former Indian wife, the infidel Christy, he did not feel that much so happy and overjoyous and sexually aroused as he is feeling today. Even though he spent with the lovely Christy 7 days of their honeymoon in the 5-star hotel of Taj Mahal, still he did not feel as happy as he is feeling today. He is secretly planning to send Sabir and Rayhana for a few days honeymoon in a fancy hotel in Riyadh City and book his room just beside their room. Then, each night he could come and enjoy his beloved Layla knowing that her paper bridegroom had been castrated and rendered totally impotent man. After that, Sheikh Ahmed along with his sons and the paper husband left Rayhana's room and went and sat in the living room. They talked to each other in whispers. They do not want to risk provoking the angry lioness. The measure of her fury led them to believe she might just spring out of her bedroom at any moment and attack them or run to the maidservant's room and kill her. Khalid and Tariq peppered their father with questions. How did you find the beautiful Indian maidservant Rayhana? Why did you suggest the two servants should get married? In general, the two teenage sons are happy about the marriage. They know that her new husband Rafiq does not always sleep in their house. No one calls Sabir by his name in that Saudi home. Everyone calls him Rafiq. As we mentioned before, for every Arab, every Indian man is called Rafiq. Arabs do not distinguish between Indians, Pakistanis, or Bangladeshis. For them, all are coming from the Indian subcontinent. It is just like Indians think every black man is known as Negro and he is originally from the black continent of Africa. The educated Indians know that the blacks of the two American continents are the descendants of the Africans who were taken by the European settlers as slaves during the transatlantic slave trade voyages between the 3 centuries of 16th, 17th, and 19th. The two cunning teenage sons know that this Pakistani Rafiq has to follow their father from house to house and stay with him wherever he goes. So, it is clear to them that they could still blackmail the chauffeur's lovely wife for sex by using her nude dancing video. The serious problem they are facing is that they do not have the key to Rayhana's new room. They have already planned to steal the new key and make a duplicate copy of it. The new events have done nothing to change their interest in the beautiful maidservant, having sex with her at night, making videotapes, and showing off in school. Sheikh Ahmed waited many hours for his angry wife to come out of their bedroom and talk to him. He regretted that he had challenged her. He knows that if she left the house and returned to her wealthy father's house, he would be in some serious trouble in his business. Half of his business came from her wealthy father. Therefore, to avoid any problems, Sheikh Ahmed shrewdly decided to compromise. He decided to accept her decision and send Rayhana and her daughter to the house of his third wife. Still, the marriage between the chauffeur and the maidservant would remain valid and continue forever. He would not agree to force Sabir to divorce Rayhana if his wife Mastora made that demand. When his outraged wife does not come out until the evening, he takes it upon himself to go to her bedroom and try talking to her and propose his compromise. Mastora was lying on her back when her husband came in. Her eyes are wide open, staring at the ceiling. When she heard him entering the bedroom, she averted her eyes and fixated on him. Her small and red eyes are the gateway to hell. He sat beside her and tried to touch her. She pushed his hand away and stood up. Then, she marched out of the bedroom, headed to the living room, and sat down. Her sons had already gone to their rooms, and the chauffeur was nowhere to be seen. She became more outraged when she visualized her secret lover and sex satisfier on the bed and having sex in her house with that dirty Indian maidservant. Thoughts of stabbing Rayhana still clouded her mind. Her husband came and sat in front of her, trying to engage her in conversation. Once again, the extremely angry wife has purposely ignored her husband and remained silent. Through her silence, he apologized and promised to send the new Indian maidservant Rayhana and her daughter Ifit to his third wife's house. Her face revealed to him that his apology and compromise had done nothing but make her even more furious. Nothing could quench the boiling anger in her jealous heart and the flaming fire in her small eyes save sending her rival woman to the grave or jail. Sheikh Ahmed sat for more than 2 hours in front of his wife and tried patiently to get her to talk, but he could not make any headway or pacify her. She seemed to have gotten stuck in a sullen and sulky mood. Finally, he decided it was best to leave her to cool off by herself and talk to her tomorrow. He got up from the couch and went to their bedroom. He changed his clothes and put on his night jilbab. He wants to rest for some time, tired by the exertion of the day's activities. He is quite sure and expects his angry wife to return to bed and sleep near him once she gets sleepy. He thought as soon as she fell asleep he would sneak out and go to his lovely new bride and enjoy his first wedding night with her. Tired of trying to appease his ugly fourth wife, he is resigned to staying put on his bed, and he begins to imagine the great enjoyment and pleasure awaiting him on his first wedding night. He was determined not to close his eyes. He is afraid that due to his advanced age, he might fall asleep and miss the splendor of his first wedding night with his new concubine. Meanwhile, the crazy old man Kais is enjoying imagining how he would approach his beloved Layla. He asked himself what he should do first to her. Should he take her in his arms and hug her for a long time, or should he start kissing her immediately on her sweet lips? Should he remove her clothes piece by piece, or ask her to undress and be ready for him? And when she became ready to consummate their secret matrimonial union, which sex style should he assume? Should he have sex with her in what Western people call doggy style or classical style, which is also known as the missionary position? He knew and understood that in his advanced age, he would not be able to do anything too strenuous. He told himself that he should just ask his naked beloved Layla to climb on top of him and do it her way or follow the cowgirl style. If he tries to fuck her in the dog style, he might fall off her body before he ejaculates in her virgin pussy. The crazy Kais has been so carried away in his sexual fantasies with his lovely Layla that his mouth has become ajar with a trickle of drool running down the side of his face. Suddenly, the old geezer stopped his daydreaming and looked at his watch. He began to worry about his first wedding night. He checked his watch intermittently. Each passing minute made his heartbeat increase and become faster. His angry wife is not back yet. Worried that things were not going according to plan, he jumped out of bed, cracked the door open, and peered at her. She is sitting exactly as he had left her, stationary, like an alabaster statue. He now regretted trying to talk to her in the bedroom. If he had anticipated that she would come out and sit in the living room, he would not have tried to placate her. Now she is sitting like an armed night guard in front of the prison gate, and there is no way he could go to his beloved secret wife's room without passing directly into her line of fire. From where she is sitting, she has an eagle's eye view of the maidservant's room. The old man now has a serious problem. He went to his bed, sat for some time, returned to the door, and peeped out again. His outraged wife is still sitting motionless in exactly the same spot. He felt like doing something rash, like taking a knife and scaring her and making her flee for her life out of the house. Or he should divorce her and send her home to her father's palace tonight. However, sanity returning, he calmed himself down and fidgeted, waiting impatiently for his wife to get tired and come to bed. Checking again, his mad wife is still in the same position, looking angrily at the wall. A thought flashed in front of his restless mind and gave him a glimmer of hope. It looked like his wife had fallen asleep sitting upright. He made his way as quietly as he could and as slowly as possible into the living room. Looking into her eyes, he saw anger shooting like a lightning bolt of thunder, and he struck his soul and paralyzed his body. When he overcame his fear and panic, he tried to reason with his outraged wife and convince her once again to come to bed. She has just as before ignored him and continued to look at the wall. Begging her one last time and not getting any response at all, he gave up, made his way back to the bedroom, and fell asleep at 4:30 a.m. The following morning, Sheikh Ahmed's sleep is disturbed by the last person he expected to see at that early hour of the morning. His ugly wife pulled him up out of bed, her face radiant and happy. She could not hide her joy. She is laughing hysterically to the point where she could not talk until fell near him on the bed and held her stomach. Sheikh Ahmed thought that he was dreaming of an unattainable dream. His mind informed him that the happy woman who woke him up while her heart was bubbling with joy and her ugly face was uncontrollably laughing could not possibly be his angry wife Mastora. Even if heaven rained down gold and silver, his angry wife would not suddenly change overnight. She held his jilbab and shook him violently over and over again and laughed hysterically. By now, he is fully awake and convinced that this is indeed no dream. He has no choice but to accept the unavoidable fact that this cheery wife and jovial woman is actually none other than his ugly fourth wife, Mastora. To him, it looked as though she had lost her mind due to her strong emotional trauma. His first reaction is to slap her face and bring her to her normal mental condition. Some people believe a powerful slap is a remedy for sudden madness. So, Sheikh Ahmed lifted his right hand as far as possible and struck his wife on her cheek. Her small eyes happened to be closed, and she was laughing when he hit her on her left cheek and made her left ear deaf. For that reason, she could not see his right hand when he raised it above his head. Mrs. Ahmed, shocked back to normal, reverted back to being the poisonous cobra woman and shouted at her old husband, "You must rather go and slap the Indian prostitute that you have brought to me from the street. Go and see the men who have come to take her away." Sheikh Ahmed was so troubled when he heard the tone of her challenge. It frightened him to hear her say, "Go and see the men who have come to take her away." He asked her in fear and trembling, "Who has come to take the Indian maidservant Rayhana Khan away?" "The Jeddah policemen have come and arrested her and want to drag her from here and throw her behind bars. They are waiting to talk to you before they take her away." If his wife had brought a knife and severed his neck or stabbed his heart, Sheikh Ahmed would not have felt so much pain. His body has become so hot as if someone has set it on fire. He began to murmur unintelligibly. He tried to stand, but his feet failed him. His ugly wife helped him stand with much difficulty and assisted him until she managed to bring him out. The sight of 4 Saudi policemen standing in the living room greeted him like 4 scary demons suddenly manifested in front of his eyes. He has seen his beloved Layla in chains, while she is kneeling on the floor and her hands are handcuffed behind her back. She is still in her beautiful wedding gown. Instead of asking them why his Indian maidservant Rayhana Khan has been arrested, his eyes are begging the Saudi policemen to have mercy on him and release his beloved Layla. One of them spoke to him in a harsh voice and said, "This young Indian woman is a professional prostitute. She goes around the city cheating men, getting them to marry her, and eventually, she robs them of their money and runs away. In less than 3 weeks, she has deceived 2 men and married them." Here we have copies of her 2 marriage certificates. One marriage certificate is with an Indian man by the name of Aslam Ali Khan, and the second marriage certificate with a Pakistani man by the name of Sabir Ibrahim Shah. Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed could not take the impact and shock of what he had heard, and therefore his brain stopped functioning. His body was first frozen, then paralyzed, and he became deaf, dumb, and lost all his senses. Finally, his decrepit body has fallen on the red carpet of the floor like a lifeless corpse.